This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts are not trained professionals, and their opinions come solely from personal experience. In this episode, we discuss fictional depictions of trauma and violence that may not be suitable for all audiences. Please take care of yourselves. Specific content warnings for each episode can be found in the show notes. Events in the media are discussed in approximate order of escalation. This episode contains spoilers.
This week, we are discussing Pretties, the second book in the Uglies Quartet by Scott Westerfeld. In this book, nothing is as it seems, and no one is as safe as they appear. Hi, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Robin, and welcome to Books That Burn. Alright, let's get into our factions. We have Tally, Zane, Paris, Shay, Fausto, Andrew Simpson Smith, Croy, David, and Dr. Cable.
I like
One of those names was not like the others.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I like that Andrew's name is a full 3-name name.
I mean, Tally's is Tally Youngblood, but
yeah,
we don't really get last names for most everybody else. And she spends most of the book being called Tallywa as a nickname thing. Interesting nicknames that involve making your name longer.
That's a good point. I
mean, it is a nickname, it forms that function, but their names are already so short.
Yeah.
That it's a nickname in an affectionate way, not in a we need to save time way. Which is fine. It's just, I'm not a nickname person. I'm just not.
And this is also not generally a nickname podcast. So it's fine if we just...
Luckily, it's fine. I am ready to talk about our minor character spotlight.
Alright.
For Zane, poor Zane, with the brain damage and headaches and migraines. So, what's happening here is that... Okay, so, spoilers for a reveal 90% of the way through the book.
Oh, okay.
This is a spoiler section.
Heads up.
This event happens 90% of the way through the book. So, basically, early in the book, Tally and Zane took the 2 pills of the cure. They each took one, and they, for some reason, assumed that 2 pills were going to have the exact same effect, and they did not. And Zane took the ones that have nano things that eat the lesions in the brain, and Tally took the pill that tells the nano things when to stop. So Tally technically didn't get the cure, and Zane, they just kept eating his brain. And then once he gets he's in such pain, he ends up going to the hospital, and the hospital doesn't tell him, and they stop the things from continuing to eat his brain, but then they put a thing in his tooth to make him still be in pain and pretend that they are still eating his brain so that they will keep going with the plan to hook up in the smoke. I feel like all of those are very relevant to he spends this entire book, most of it actively being increasingly brain damaged and all of it in pain.
Yeah.
Because even after he wasn't continuing to be damaged, they made him still in pain, which is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my summary /rant/spiel about this.
Yeah, so this is kind of a funny, I don't know, thing for me to think about. Because obviously, headaches and things are real things. But also, your brain is made of nerves, but as far as I know, it doesn't really have pain nerves in it, which is why you can have, open brain surgery without, a lot of...
What he had is not the same as a concussion.
I know.
But I had a concussion, and like, headaches are a thing. Like, headaches come from somewhere, and even if the only thing that the nano stuff did was mess with the part of your brain that makes you have a headache, that'd be enough, because the brain is just interpreting a pain signal, and it's being given pain signals because something is doing something to the brain. I mean, even if all he had was the way headaches felt when I just had normal headaches, like, after the concussion, even if all he had was that, like, that feels awful in a way that I don't know how to describe. But anyone else hearing this who's had a concussion will know the feeling that I mean. Because it's a very specific weird thing. So, like, there's all kinds of ways where just because the brain doesn't have nerves doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. And I have this doesn't just break suspension of disbelief of anything for me. This is just, yep, that would hurt. Completely understand.
Okay,
even if all it did is mess with his pain centers.
See, I don't have. I do not have those experiences. And to be fair, I figured out recently what actually happens to me. My brain, I think, kind of mutes pain at a certain point. So, like, things hurt, but, like, I've never felt pain that stops me from doing something.
Yeah, as your sibling, I can vouch that you have an absurdly high pain tolerance. And, yeah, you saying, well, I intellectually know this hurt, but it just doesn't feel like it. I'm like, that fits all of your behavior ever. This makes sense. Yeah, so, no, I can completely...
Yeah, so I think I as a person just don't really have reference for this headache means that I can't function. Like, I don't...
Nope, I completely do. This to me was believable even before my concussion experience.
Yeah.
And after my concussion experience, I'm like, absolutely.
Like, yeah, of course.
I didn't need that to believe this, but this means I have no room for saying, oh, just because it's just the nano things eating his brain, it's not going to hurt. No, that would hurt. Even if all they do is eat through the part of the brain that processes pain, because they don't really have a direction, that's going to hurt. With that, like... Yeah,
them not having a direction is like, oof.
I feel like even if they were supposed to go to a particular zone...
I mean, if they literally just go...
This very experimental pill designed by someone in a cabin in the woods had some problems.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, like it's a good thing that it didn't grab his motor functions or didn't grab onto his automatic functions. Well, he didn't quit breathing, his heart didn't quit beating, his blood sugar didn't spike and die. Like, those are the kinds of things I'm talking about.
I asked my question when you said, how do you know it didn't go to his motor functions? And I'm like, seems like maybe it did.
That's
yes,
fair.
I agree that it didn't make it down to his brainstem. But, like, he seemed to have trouble with stuff. I remember there being some subtle motor things that were going on. Like, even if it was just he was in so much pain, like, it wouldn't have to be that it messed with motor stuff, but it messed with something.
Yeah.
Point is, he, like, as a trauma in the book, we have a lot of speculation about exactly how much was going on, because we're going to cover this more in our next topic, but because of the way they were being surveilled, he was in constant pain, trying to hide it from Tally, and even if he wasn't trying to hide it from her to, like, be strong or relationship reasons or something, like, they were being surveilled.
Yeah.
And he needed to try and not communicate, and so even if he would have wanted to vent or tell her or say something,
he can't.
He can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a big part of this trauma, too, is just he literally had to suffer in silence, almost on pain of death. Or at least they thought so, you know?
Yeah.
Just because, right? Yeah. Just because they don't know. They're trying so hard to be sneaky.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is they're so heavily surveilled that it didn't matter. But, we will talk about the surveillance later. But in terms of needing to conceal the symptoms, regardless of the reason that he had to conceal them, he's working hard to remember, like, he's got memory stuff going on, and, like, memory problems are really scary. Like, having just enough memory to know that you can't remember something, or it's fuzzy, or it's weird. Like, I've been through that, and it's really terrifying. I mean, just
purely on an intellectual level.
Well, no, not purely on an intellectual level, but, like, for me, it's not. Like, I don't know,
Maybe intellectual isn't the right word.
Like, I remember weird facts and trivia, like, forever, but I can't just tell you if I've already seen a movie or not. Like, nope. Like, my wife is the one who remembers what movies we've actually seen together, because unless I have a lot more wrapped up in that experience, I'm like, I don't know. If I finished it, I must have liked it. Like, I've done a lot of work to change stuff like that, but memory stuff is really scary. And just, he's got that going on, and he can't talk about it, and he's in all this pain. This is a terrible, terrible time that he's having. In terms of how it's getting portrayed in the actual book, and not just us speculating about what might be going on, there's a lot of ways where we see what's happening, and it felt like the author knows what's going on. Tally is observing certain things, and because of that, you're able to infer quite a lot about what might be happening, especially as you get more reveals later in the book.
Yeah.
But Tally is 16 and doesn't put all the clues together. Doesn't have the experience, doesn't realize, doesn't be between, like, I don't think even in her ugly version she would have had the experience to know this stuff, and her still pretty brained trying to stay bubbly version still doesn't have the experience and doesn't have the ability to notice all of it. It's just a really interesting thing in how they're portraying this event.
I really enjoy that this is one of those books, one of those series, I guess, where the characters don't know so much, even when it's in the text explicitly, to the point where it's definitely a series where a second read is a different story.
Yes.
And I don't know. I actually really like that about it.
And you hadn't read these before, right? Just
no.
Checking. Right. So I'm the one who said we should read these. This was my first dystopian series that I ever read. And I really like it. I mentally compare most other dystopias to this series.
I mean, if this was my first, I would too. This is pretty good.
Yep. That's pretty much all I had for Zane. Brain damage really sucks, and the way it's getting portrayed is about as much as we could when he's not the point of view character. On to Tally and Zane for surveillance and loss of privacy. We're focusing a little bit more on Tally, but as we mentioned in topic 1, Zane definitely has some surveillance and loss of privacy things going on. I'm going to briefly talk about Zane and then move on to Tally.
Fair enough.
For Zane, he has all these physical symptoms like headaches and just all this stuff happening. And he can't talk about it because they are being constantly surveilled. And pretty early on in the book, like...
You said pretty.
There's a lot of setup.
That's not even a good joke. But
No. There's a lot of setup to get to the point where they're actively being surveilled, but in terms of the main action, it is pretty early on when they get handcuffs that listen to them.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So they have, instead of just ambiently being surveilled and having stuff that knows where they are all the time because you can't interface with the doors or use an elevator or anything, and vehicles won't see you and they'll just hit you if you don't have your ring on, your interface ring. They go from just that level of surveillance where you can like take it off if you want to do something, or then they go all the way to they have wrist cuffs that are actively spying on them because they did something they weren't supposed to do. And so the main thing with Zane is that he's having all these symptoms and he can't communicate how much pain he's in because he's not supposed to be having those symptoms at all, because it's that they took the pills to try and get rid of the lesions on their brain that the city put there. So the city doesn't want him to lose the lesions, and it's just a whole tangled mess of stuff. And there's like layers and games where like you spend most of the book thinking that the city didn't know and they really got away with it, and then here's where I'm shifting my topic to Tally. Yeah. You find out that no, they were never actually getting away with anything. And this feels kind of like...
Seems to be the theme of this book, is you never get away with anything.
Exactly. Like, I kind of almost want to, like, make, like, one of those Galaxy Brain memes for this. Because, like, the first level would be that Tally in book 1, like, is an ugly and she's getting away with stuff. And yeah, and then she finds out she's so smart and she's, like, so tricky, and she, you know, leaves this window and this way and goes on this path, and oh, the shadows drape exactly right.
It's such a perfect path.
It's such a good path.
Almost like it was custom built for her.
And then the next level is, oh, uglies are supposed to get up to stuff, because then they have an idea of maybe who would want to do, like, a dangerous job or something, or, like, being a firefighter, or any of those things. Like, you know, who might want to do something a little bit riskier when they're a pretty. And then there's realizing that uglies and pretties are supposed to get up to stuff so that they become specials. And even the mechanism of rebellion is controlled.
It's such a thorough... It's weird. Like, I know we end up coming in talking about gaslighting a lot, but it's almost that.
I don't know if I would classify this as gaslighting, because...
Cultural gaslighting?
Indoctrination. I'll grant you indoctrination, because
indoctrination is really the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is, because they're saying, here's how you ought to behave. Yeah. And then if someone's like, no, I want to do this, they're like, okay, cool. So if you've decided to behave like this, we have a thing for that. That's different. Yeah. Gaslighting would be insisting that they're not being surveilled. Like, no one's telling them that. They just kind of assumed that they'd gotten away with stuff, and then they hadn't. If they had been like, no, nothing's actually tracking you, everything's fine, and then it was very obvious that it was not fine, and the more that they say, the more the thing pushes back. That would be gaslighting.
Yeah. That's why I was saying, like, it's not, but I didn't have a better word for it. But yeah, indoctrination is the word.
The word. Yeah.
It's just an odd...
I do like to define gaslighting every couple episodes, because we talk about it so much, and it's so frequently relevant.
That's the thing, is like, in fiction, especially written fiction, it's one of those things where it's very easy to put on a page.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so it's not that we talk about it a lot because we think about it a lot. We talk about it a lot because it's in a lot of books.
Yeah.
And it pretty heavily influences everything when it's in those books. And so it's very hard to choose a different trauma when a lot
there's
of times
also gaslighting. Yeah.
when there's also gaslighting, and the gaslighting is the setup for that trauma sometimes, or it enables it to happen, or it's just very hard to ignore it.
I would say Dr. Cable comes the closest to gaslighting, but it's mostly indoctrination.
Yeah.
Dr. Cable is more of a selective information situation with occasional lying.
Occasional
mishandling of information and lying and all the stuff. Mishandling. Yep, it's... So, back to the topic of the surveillance and the loss of privacy, this idea that even rebellion is controlled and channeled and put into a particular place, and the way they can do that is because everyone's being watched all the time.
Mm-hmm.
When these came out, that felt a little bit more far-fetched than it does now in 2020 while we're recording this. I'm like, them carrying an interface ring so it knows where they are all the time. Stares at cell phone.
Yeah.
So, but this isn't about it is automatically bad that something knows where you are. That's an entirely different topic for an entirely different podcast. But it's more that their world is so small that, and everything is controlled in a way that our actual world is like too messy most of the time for that to happen. But here, the system is designed very specifically.
It's very minute, intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Like, even stuff like the shadow patterns are right to sneak out along this way in the Uglies compound. Like, even that stuff. The ruins are close enough that you can maybe walk to and definitely hoverboard to them.
The metals in that particular river are closer to the surface than other rivers. The water is shallower along that path. Like, it's just very fortuitous a lot of times. And actually,
like, you're listing stuff they didn't even talk about, but
which doesn't necessarily mean it was crafted that way, but it's super convenient when you view it in that light.
Yeah, I was more thinking that this world is so sculpted that you say the stuff about the river, and I'm like, yeah, that's probably what's going on. That's probably not what's going on. That's probably not what the author thought about. Probably?
Well,
but I don't know if I don't know if I can say that.
I don't know.
There's so much.
Tally goes out of the bounds of their minute control, and all of a sudden the rivers aren't as nice.
Oh, you're right. Oh.
Like, that's a thing. Her board breaks because that river isn't made for her. Like, her board doesn't break because of that, but she loses the pieces because that river, the metals are not as close to the surface, and the water's not as shallow. Like, that's a thing.
Yeah, that is a thing.
That's a thing that she intentionally thinks through the reasons why her board isn't coming back. Like, it's more...
To be clear, her board broke because she fell out of the...
Yeah, no...
Kind of a lot.
No, her board broke because of gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And inertia and impact.
But if she'd been in the city, gravity wouldn't have mattered, so we're back to the control theme.
Yeah, but also, like, I just think about with intention of the author,
mm-hmm.
the author specifically has Tally highlight thoughts about the rivers not being as nice for hoverboarding, not being as convenient, metals not being as close to the surface, water being deeper. Tally thinks about that both times, one in each book, that we've seen her go out of bounds of this sculpted area.
That's
like,
true.
She has active thoughts about this. So as far as, like, an author, deliberate by the author point of view, like, with as much as Tally is realizing how sculpted it is, I would be shocked if that wasn't something that the author built in as part of that sculpting.
No, I've heard your argument, and now I agree. That makes sense.
I would also love to hear the author's response to that, just because you're right, it's not a detail that the characters, like, specifically talk about, but I'm now curious.
But there's enough stuff where Tally's like, here's what's going on. I don't know why it's like that. Or I heard that it was like that because the Rusties were like this.
Yeah.
I focused more on the ones where it's, hey, the Rusties were like this.
Yeah.
But there's enough world building here that, yeah, that probably on purpose. It could be on purpose as a plot contrivance so that the character struggles more. And it could be on purpose as a world building thing. Either way.
Well, I was gonna say, most plot contrivances have turned out to be the specials contrivances.
Actually doing stuff,
same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I also, one quick note before we go on to topic 3. As you're talking about it being contrived, it made me kind of think about Tally's internal monologue when she's in that, the pre-Rusties camp.
Yeah.
Because she has this thought of them being in, like, their own little bubble, contained by the specials, and then she realizes, wait, so are we. And then she goes on to think about other things, but, like, there is that moment where she kind of goes, we're all in our own bubbles. All run by the same people. It's very good world building. It's very good, it's very clean, but it's not clean in a sterilized way, it's clean in a very just, like, self-reflective way. And I don't mean self-reflective as in people thinking about yourself. I mean as in, like, spiraling reflective.
I'm not sure if that metaphor makes sense to me.
I
hope it made sense to you.
It did make sense to me, but I'm the one who thought it.
Do you mean a panopticon? I don't know. They're
like
in a pan.
Like infinite mirrors reflecting into each other.
Oh, okay.
Forever.
Yeah.
That kind of way. The infinite mirror thing. The thing that everyone is familiar with.
Yeah.
Right.
Moving on to food denial behavior from Tally. We're going to put a content warning here for discussions of self-harm, because we consider this type of food denial to be a form of self-harm for some people, and just take care of yourselves. So it's she doesn't have anorexia nervosa or some other kind of anorexia driven by, like, the more classic portrayal of, like, trying to be thinner when she actually wasn't overage. It's not that. It's not anorexia in the way that it's in a way that would be about her weight, but she is trying to lose weight.
It's specifically about her wrist.
It's specifically about trying to get a cuff off of her wrist, and then weeks or perhaps months, but I think definitely weeks into being on a starvation diet, skipping meals, and taking calorie purgers, she figures out, oh, maybe I can't get thinner because that's just my wrist bones.
Yeah.
And then considers breaking her wrist.
Yeah.
She doesn't actually break her wrist, but she's so desperate. Understandably so, in the books. She is so desperate to be able to take the surveillance cuff off of her wrist that it overlaps with it is food denial behavior in general, and it borders on being other kinds. Because here's the thing, she's not throwing up, but in terms of a mental thing, taking the calorie purgers after eating, or even if she hasn't eaten, that feels like technologically assisted bulimia. But we in this podcast we'll talk about magical analogs for things. This is a
scientific.
Yeah, this is a hand wavy sci-fi analog for this thing, and if someone with actual training read these books and said, yep, this is a depiction of anorexia and bulimia, I'd be like, okay, all right then. I don't have any pushback on that. Because my understanding is that there's like a feeling or a reason or like a continual, well, if I just lose a little more, then something will be fine. And then it's never fine, because that's not how that works. And it's never enough. And so she has this really specific, concrete goal of, I need to be thin enough to slip the cuff off of my wrist.
Yeah. But that still does have a very clear, direct analog to slim enough to be this size in a store, slim enough to have this shape, slim enough to
fit those pants, like whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, like that's not even a stretch.
Yeah. And we know that the author had anorexia and or bulimia in mind when writing the series, because the books keep referring to that disease that the Rusties had. Tally seems to think that way more of them had it than actually would have, because of the differences in the cultural norms around weight between the 90s or 2000s, which would have been the reference point, probably based on when these books were written, and whatever size people are when these books are set, which we don't know. But yeah, it's a futuristic tech version, a technology-assisted version of anorexia and bulimia. But I would say that, for me, the way this is depicted, it's depicted in a way that seems like someone who put in time to understand what's happening, but it's not, like, there isn't a ton of ideation.
No. In fact, I would argue there's almost none.
Yeah. I mean, they're talking about the plan, and it's, oh, the handcuff won't slip over my wrist yet. The closest thing to ideation comes when she keeps thinking about maybe she'll need to hurt her wrist by breaking a bone. But even then, it's not quite the same thing, because she moves on to a plan that is much safer as soon as one becomes available.
Regardless of her moving on, she looks in the text, she looks at her arm and notices that she is too thin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thinks of it as too thin.
She thinks of it as too thin. She doesn't think of it as not thin enough. She thinks of it as, I'm too thin to be healthy, and also, I'm not thin enough to get out of my prison.
Yeah.
But it's not, I'm not thin enough because, like, I'm not worthy or I didn't make it yet or whatever. It's, oh no, how long can I keep this up because I'm unhealthy already? Which is a very different thought process and really kind of breaks that chain of seeing it as a positive.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very deliberate in its placement to me too, because she looks at herself and goes, I am too thin to be healthy. This is not good. I don't know if I can keep this up long enough to get out of my prison, and also, I might have to break my wrist to get out of this anyway. Like, that's the thought process. So it doesn't even, I mean, other people might have a different take on it, but it doesn't even read like ideation to me at all.
Yeah, and just this series, if you're going to deal with various kinds of self-harm behavior, especially by teens, but not societally limited to teens, but I'd say more concentrated among teens. If you're going to have a book for teens that talks about it, having read this as a teen, this book made me aware that I wasn't the only person thinking some of the stuff that I was thinking, but it didn't make it worse.
Oh, that makes sense.
So it's more like, oh, like it's not just me, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
But it didn't ramp anything up. And having read stuff that did make it worse, I'm glad that this didn't. And this, if anyone, has read these and, you know, has overlapping behaviors or ideations with topics in these books, like, we'd like to know how these were for you, because everyone's experience with this is going to be different. We'll see what we say for this in the wrap-up, but I liked that this series is not afraid to acknowledge that this kind of stuff is an issue for teens and exists, and it's depicted without it being the point of the book. Like, you can't pull it out as a theme.
No.
But the quest of the book isn't overcome your anorexia. Like, it's not.
Or spiral into it. It's also not that.
Or, right, it's also not a story of just falling into it. Like, it really isn't. It's not, like, succeed or succumb. It's a separate thing.
I don't think I've actually read another series that has this in it where it's not a major theme like that.
Oh, yeah?
I think this might be the only one. Because you're right. Usually when we get this kind of a theme, it becomes the main idea for a while. But here, it's definitely just a plot point.
Yeah. Like, there's a book I've mentioned that or alluded to that doesn't handle this well, that we'll probably talk about at some point. I'm in a good headspace because it doesn't handle it well, and I need to make sure I'm okay before we talk about it on the podcast. But in that book, the person is portrayed as bad because of this. It's gratuitously depicted, and they're treated, they are doing something that hurts other people because of the situation in the book. And something that just would have been just a problem for them becomes a community problem. And it just gets super bad. And this isn't that. And so going to this book, they have a specific goal. It's, I'd say if anyone in this is technologically assisted bulimia, I would say it's Zane. And we already know that, like, Shay has some self-harm behavior. We know it's in there. We read these books too. We're gonna talk about it in book 3. But there's various kinds of self-harm behavior that show up with different characters. Yeah, just not showing, like, understanding without ideation is such a difficult line.
It's a rarity.
And I feel like this got it. Like, if you're actively having trouble with food-related ideation and food denial, probably didn't listen to this segment of the podcast because you saw the content warnings. But if you're still listening, you know, take care of yourself. If stuff in the book triggers you, like, stop. It's okay. That's just a blanket for any of these books. You can stop. You don't have to finish the book. It's okay. We occasionally will have books on this podcast where one of us didn't finish it because we're reading books about trauma. And that's okay.
and as we're reading, actively thinking about the trauma and how it's happening, which...
Yeah.
That is a whole extra layer on there.
Yep. So, to this specific thing, the way the food denial behavior is shown, I appreciate. Like is not the right word, but I appreciate it. I think it's done well. This is a good version of it, and there's, like, kind of like a responsibility and an awareness and, like, oh yeah, like, this is a thing that people had, and it describes anorexia and bulimia in, like, a clinical way in the sections that are like, this is how the Rusties were, both in Uglies and in this book. And I don't know, it feels, this series is like a dystopian PSA of when kids are really stressed out and don't have any form of control, they'll do things to control the only thing they control, which is their body. Parts 1 through 4.
Parts 1 through 4. Here's what people do when they have no control over their lives.
Yep.
Now, these kids have different reasons than you do, but also...
And those reasons are the plot, but yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm
Shar.
And I'm Kelly, and together we host Drinking and Screaming.
We're a new horror discussion podcast based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, where each episode we pair a new cocktail with our movie of the week.
For instance, I'm pairing this ad with just a shot of tequila. You know, because most ads are horrible.
With Drinking and Screaming, you'll find yourself pulled into a new horror film to discuss and a new cocktail to try every week.
Every episode is laced with great soundtracks, theme breakdowns, production trivia, Char's bad drinks, and so much more.
What?
I said clips from the movie.
New episodes every week. Join in on the spoops. Drinking and Screaming, wherever podcasts are found.
I give this ad a 5 out of 10.
You know, we don't rate the movies.
5 out of 10.
This month, we'd like to welcome our new supporter on Patreon, Alex Cintron. Thank you so much for supporting the show, and if you would like to join Alex in keeping the show going, you can check us out on patreon.com/booksthatburn. Thank you.
For the wrap-up and ratings. For the gratuity rating on the brain damage, moderate?
Yes.
What's there is moderate.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
It's not constantly in the book, but when it's there, it's at least moderate.
It's at least moderate. The debate in my head is there enough for it to be severe? I guess not.
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Moderate.
Yep. I mean, it didn't remind me of other times I've had headaches. Like, it's possible it could do that for someone.
I was thinking more... If anyone has had a relative and they've watched them go through dementia or they've watched them go through from the outside.
I'd say moderate, but accurate. So it could be...
It's the accurate part that I thought might kick it up.
Yeah. Something can be like mild and still very accurate. So I would just say that...
That's true. Okay. All right. Moderate.
It's moderate, but if something that is sci-fi dementia is not something you can handle right now, don't...
Like we say, skip it.
Yep,
don't read it. Alright, loss of privacy.
And surveillance.
I actually think this one was was severe.
Okay.
I don't think it's severe for people who have not had loss of privacy as an abuse mechanism in their lives. But
if you have...
I think Tally's slow realization kicks it up to severe because it mirrors very closely that actual feeling of realizing that things you thought that were your own are not, never have been.
Yeah, especially when there's multiple kind of stages to the realization.
Yes, exactly. So I think that one is severe.
Okay, alright. For the food denial...
Severe.
Severe.
Severe in its depiction, but severe.
Yep.
No, although I do, and we'll probably... no, I'll save that for the other
We're
category.
gonna have a care rating, that's what that's for.
Yep. Alright,
Is the trauma integral? Yes, the brain damage is integral to the plot. I think certain... What?
I was moving on. Sorry.
I did too. Yeah, brain damage integral to the plot.
No, I was going on to loss of privacy now. What were you going to say about brain damage?
Oh, just that certain small aspects maybe could be interchangeable. Like you could tweak details, but
yeah, but the
overarching
main thing,
yeah, integral to the plot. The surveillance is integral to the series, let alone the plot of this book.
Integral to the world building.
Yep.
Yeah.
The food denial...
Interchangeable.
Yeah, it didn't have to be this. It was this because they had a very particular plan, but they could have had a different plan way earlier.
They could have had a lot of different plans.
Yep. Treated with care.
I have opinions on this section.
Alright, I think that the brain damage... I think it was... I'm debating between enough and not enough, because...
I think it was enough.
Okay.
Because of Tally's reaction to it.
I don't think it was done callously, but, looking at it from the perspective of if you have seen someone else go through dementia or a similar thing, or you have memory issues, just like that kind of thing. I don't know.
Here's my argument for enough.
Okay.
We are not the character, or our point of view is not the character who is going through
That's
it.
a good point.
Also, a lot of it happens off screen. Also, Tally, now, this ended up not being a super positive thing, but that's not her fault. Tally's reaction was not callousness, was not telling him to just deal with it, was not just, oh no, that's the price of freedom. Tally's reaction was medical care and getting him help.
That's true.
And also, spoilers. So I'm not going to go any further.
Yeah.
But I don't think it was just blanket treated with care. I don't think that there was any extra layer added, but I do think it was enough.
Okay. Yeah. I'm good with saying enough care.
I don't think it was just flat out treated with care. I think that it was treated with enough care, and I think it was treated with deliberately as much care as the author could kind of build in. So I think it was enough.
Okay. And then surveillance.
Okay,
Okay, given that it has a little bit of an edge, because, like, the book can't watch you, unless it's an audiobook or an ebook, and then it can... no.
I think... What year was this written again? I know you said it earlier. It's approximately, like, 2000...
late 2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah, okay. I think that in our modern world, this is actually treated with care.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if this had been, I think because of who the audience is that existed and does exist in our modern world, this is treated with care.
It's in a weird zone because I think it was trying to, like, kind of hammer in the impact of the surveillance.
Yeah, but we've moved on from that technologically.
Yeah, but this level, it's like, oh, my phone just does that. Like, the current debate is like, is Facebook just listening to you all the time, even when you didn't tell it to?
The answer is yes, but also that's a different question than the one that actually needs to be asked.
Yes.
Which is, does it store that information, and is it accessible by a person, and yeah.
Yep.
There's a whole layer to that, which, but basically, so with regards to the trauma of this, I still actually think it was treated with care.
Yeah.
And I actually, so I know I brought up a different point with it being severe in the fact that it mirrors a very real kind of slow realization of abuse that is pretty common, honestly, in our modern surveillance age. But also, I think that the realization and the depiction of that realization is as bare bones as you can get.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a lot of extra emotional weight and feel and reactivity to it.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's just there.
It's just kind of there, and I think that, quite literally, any emotional horror that you feel from this is self-projected, but I don't think it's because the author didn't treat it with care. I think it's because people do actually have trauma from this in real life. So yeah. I think it was just treated with care. It's so bare bones descriptions. It's unreal. It's like single sentence realizations and you move on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's handled with kid gloves as though it would explode if you touch it too hard. And I think that it really is just, it's just treated with care without sacrificing anything, which I commend the author for the way they did this, because that's hard with the way this topic is. This is a severe topic that was treated with tiny little kid gloves enough that that I think it's treated with care.
Okay. Yeah. For the food denial, I would say somewhere between care and enough. This is a very specific...
Well, I'm
going to go ahead and say enough, because...
We kind of talked about this in the topic with... Mm-hmm. It's not ideation, and there's some specific things that...
And just...
Yeah, I don't want to spoilers, but...
There's another book that, in my opinion, handled this worse, that we're going to have to talk about it, because I keep harping on this book.
But we can't compare this book to another book.
No, that was the answer to my thought, was just because this other book did it badly doesn't mean that this one couldn't also have done it badly, even if it did it better than that other one. So I'm going to say enough care.
I agree, because of the things that I said in the topic that I'm not going to repeat now. Okay.
And the point of view is Pretty Tally.
We're calling her Pretty instead of post-op. we called her pre-op. We called her pre-op Tally instead of ugly Tally. Are we switching?
Yeah. Well, bold of you to assume that there aren't more ops.
Post-first op Tally.
Yeah, post-first op Tally. I can
post one
I'll do
op.
that. Yeah, I mean, it was pre-op Tally because I don't like calling her ugly Tally. I'm fine with calling her Pretty Tally. I have fewer qualms about that.
I have more qualms about it if you're avoiding the word ugly and with the word pretty.
Well,
I don't like the I'll take this half of that dynamic, thanks.
Time happened and I forgot
This is a call out post for Robin. No, I'm just kidding.
Time happened and I forgot our previous terminology. That's all that's happened here.
That's fair. I am currently staring at it, and Robin is not. All right, post-op tally. Post-one-op tally. Okay. So, post-p-op tally? No, that's not good. Let's not do that one. Post-one-op tally. Post-one-op tally is our point of view, because she's all we get.
Yep, for everything.
We need to read some more books that let us flip-flop characters.
I mean, like... We
have. Well, I guess we've had more books that flip-flop characters than don't. It's just that...
We've recorded several in a row because our recording schedule
doesn't necessarily line up with our release schedule for a lot of reasons.
Our recording schedule is almost guaranteed to not line up with our release schedule at this point.
Yeah, I think it does stem a little... I think my comment does stem a little bit from the fact that most books I read are not single perspective forever. Most books I enjoy and reread are not single perspective forever.
Aspiring writer tip.
I couldn't remember how we worded this. Okay. Aspiring writer tip. Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm gonna have to fight not to say the same thing over and over in this series.
Okay, I have one.
Okay.
Stop me if it's what we said last time, because, as we've mentioned...
If I remember.
So, vocabulary is very... And this series takes a character in one mental state in book 1, and then has... nominally the same narrator from book 2, but experientially, and for plot reasons, they have altered vocabulary, and it makes it feel connected, but also like a different experience with them as the narrator. Word choice is so important.
I don't remember if this was our tip last time, or if we just talked about it a lot because you were excited for it.
You and I talked about it a lot. This couldn't have been the tip because we hadn't had the perspective shift yet, is what I will say without having listened back. Yep.
Okay. All right.
And if it was, it's just done really well. We've talked about it twice, if that's how this happened.
Yeah, the vernacular change while keeping the same character is very cool.
Yeah. Like, there's a different author I like that also does really, really cool things with vocabulary, but that's mostly, like, differentiating characters and subtly informing character backstory with word choice. This is showing the change in mental state of the same character by the words that they pick. And speech patterns a little bit at least, but definitely word choice.
Well, and I think word choice is also that they've been handed new vocabulary that is expected of them, but it is narratively definitely a very powerful tool.
Yep. And in terms of, like, the specific writing tip, the words that your characters reach for, especially repeatedly, inform the way that they think and the way that the reader experiences the characters. Everything from... do they swear or not? And if they do, how do they swear? What nicknames do they use for people around them? Like, this one has a lot more nicknames than it does swearing. But
it has a lot more words that are supposed to... Well, the first one has more words that are supposed to be degrading. This one has more words that are supposed to be self-descriptive.
Yeah. and fun and...
bubbly.
Yeah, bubbly. I was trying not to say bubbly, and then it happened.
No, I wanted to say bubbly.
Yeah.
I want to pull this vocab directly into our show.
What's your favorite non-traumatic thing about the book? Is there anything? This one's tricky, because there's stuff that doesn't seem traumatic for the characters, but we're sitting there like, no, you were so different. You cared about different things. You were such a different person. So it makes it an interesting experience to describe. For me, at least.
Yeah. Joke, I have spent time this week trying to think of this thing already.
Well, if you don't have one, that's okay. That can happen every once in a while. Alright, we don't know the age range of our audience. Hello, anyone who's listening.
I hope our age range is variable.
Yeah, I hope it's variable.
Personally.
Anyone who's listening, reading the transcript that'll eventually exist, or you should have.
I think everything I like about this book is trauma associated.
My favorite thing rereading this as an adult, because I was a naive young person in a lot of ways. And one of those very specific ways was I didn't understand what garden was for at all. I was like, oh, you want to be around plants. Yeah. You'd spend a lot of time in the garden next to plants, right?
Right?
Cool. Plants? No, it's at minimum, it's a makeout garden. And it's probably more than a makeout garden. And that's why it was a good place to leave their sensor rings. And that's all I want to say, because I don't want to go into spoilers. But yeah, the garden, it is not just because plants are cool, as great as that would be. So, that's my favorite non-traumatic thing about the book, is that getting to real...
That you as a child did not understand.
Did not understand.
I actually think
Didn't even think of it. Didn't occur to me until this reread. I was like, oh, that's what that's for.
Oh my gosh. Alright, I don't think this is what I said last time, and I don't think this counts as trauma.
Okay.
I actually really like the descriptions of the hawk, surgery.
What?
For the specials.
Oh, okay. I was like, what hawk?
I like...
Animorph's brain struck again. I'm like, nope, not Tobias. What are you?
Well, I mean, yeah, descriptions of Tim, too, are very cool. No, I don't know. It's one of... Okay, every once in a while, a book has a description.
They were described more as wolves.
Huh?
They were described more as being wolf-like?
Well, that depends on who described them. It went back and forth.
Okay, I mostly noticed the wolf ones.
I think... But see, people doing described as wolfish or wolf-like, I see in a lot of books. But the vulture or the hawk look is not a thing that I hear a lot or read a lot. And I don't know, every once in a while, a book has a description of something that functionally we will never see in the real world for a lot of reasons. The reason in this book being that it is genetic surgery and fake. But I would like to see what that would look like.
Yeah.
Because there's people that are described as wolfish, but even those people, if you see them in the real world, it's not necessarily a structural thing. It's more of an attitude or a behavioral thing. And maybe it's partly a jaw and cheekbone structure, but it's not to the degree that we know these people have had cosmetic surgery. I don't know.
After we record this, I'll show you the old versions of the covers for these books.
Oh, okay, cool.
So.
Yeah, yep. But yeah, that would be something where, I don't know, I would love to see, supernatural monster style. Here is what this person looks like and how they move and how it translates. I don't know. Yeah. It's just a very, very cool image in my head, which I know I'm not supposed to like that image because they are the people that we are set up by the book to dislike, but I think it sounds cool.
Yeah. And thank you for joining us. That's it for the wrap up. We'll catch you in a fortnight.
Bye, guys.
music used in this podcast was created by Nicole as HeartBeatArt Co. and is used with permission.
You can follow us on Twitter at Books That Burn, all one word.
You can email us with questions, comments, or book recommendations at booksthatburn@yahoo.com.
Support us on patreon.com/booksthatburn. All patrons get access to our upcoming book list and receive a one-time shout-out.
You can leave us an iTunes review. This helps people to find the show.
And find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.